Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tiffany Mayfield, and I just want to say thank you for coming out today to Washington Park. We're one of the sponsors here with CS Science in the Parks, and we're definitely appreciative of coming on board with this event. And I'm just basically here to let you guys know that health is very important, and the Park District here is one of the places that you can get fit and stay healthy and live long and prosperous youthful lives. One of the things that we do offer is we have 69 fitness centers, which start from the north side of Chicago all the way to the south as far as 132nd Street. And with prescription BMIs over 26, you're allowed to utilize our fitness centers for 3 months for free. I will have some general information out in the lobby after your presentation. One of the things also that I wanted to touch on is that not only do we offer fitness centers, but we do offer programs for yoga, Pilates, weight training, kickboxing. So we offer various programs throughout the Park District outside of our 69 fitness centers. So I thank you all for coming out today, and look forward to seeing some of you in the hallway. Thank you.
My name's Ashley Suppose, and I'm the Operations and Outreach Administrator for Northwestern's George M. O'Brien Kidney Research Core Center. That is a mouthful, so we call ourselves NUGO Kidney for short. And welcome, and thank you again for coming out this afternoon. The afternoon's program, as Tiffany mentioned, is hosted in part by C2ST, or the Chicago Council for Science and Technology, NUGO Kidney, and also Chicago Parks, and it's part of their Science in the Parks program. For those of you that are new to the Chicago Council for Science and Technology, C2ST is a nonprofit organization that's been around for 12 years, and they're working to enhance the public's understanding of science and technology and the impact that that has on society. As you may or may not know, they offer 30 low-cost programs or free programs throughout the year on a variety of topics around science and technology. A couple months ago, I went to the Science on Star Wars one. It was really awesome and fun and engaging, and they have a ton of other programs. A few of them are coming up over the next couple weeks. There's the Art of Logic that's happening on November 21st, and they also have a postcard out there with the other upcoming events that they have. You can also access those at c2st.org, or you can have them delivered directly to your inbox via their email list, which also has a sign up outside. Sorry, make sure I hit all the heavy hitters here. The Science in the Park series was developed between C2ST and the Park District to be a resource for all of the people in Chicago's communities about timely and relevant topics related to health and science and locally minded science, particularly locally minded science here in Chicago. A few housekeeping things, especially because we are a pretty small crowd here. Phones. Sorry. Those are things that you have in your pockets, and they don't have to stay there throughout the presentation, but if you could just make sure that they're silenced, that would be great. We encourage you to take photos and tweet. That's part of how the word spreads around these wonderful events that they put on, so feel free to do that. Just make sure it doesn't disrupt your neighbor or anything like that. You can also use the conference app. I'm going to mess that up, so it's on the sign there. You can use that to ask questions anonymously and also evaluate the program at the end. And then during the Q&A, please be respectful of those who may be hard of hearing and wait till the microphone gets to you to ask the question. All right, now without much further ado, I am very excited and honored to introduce our amazing speaker here today. I've had the chance to work with her at NUGO Kidney on a few projects, and I'm very excited about continuing that journey with her. So, sorry. I'm going to read from my script here because I don't want to miss anything because she's amazing and you should know. Dr. Danae Simpson, she's an assistant professor of surgery and a core member of the Comprehensive Transplant Center at Northwestern's Feinberg School of Medicine. She received her medical degree from New York University and completed her general surgery residency at Brigham and Women's Hospital of Harvard University Medical School. Her academic focus is on disparities within the African American community in regards to transplantation. She leads Northwestern Medicine's African American Transplant Access Program, which aims to increase education about transplant, access to transplant, and help patients with navigation of the evaluation and listing process, which, as you'll hear, it can be pretty complicated. Dr. Simpson also serves on the board of directors for the National Kidney Foundation of Illinois, which also has some representation here today in the back of the room, so please go visit that also. And then she's also an internal advisory board member for NU Go Kidney, and I'm really excited for her to share her enthusiasm and expertise today here with you. So, without much further ado, help me welcome Dr. Danae Simpson.
Thank you. So I want to say thanks first to Ashley for that very nice introduction, and thanks to everybody who came out. It's a small crowd, but that's nice because then we get to have a nice intimate conversation. Thank you to C2ST for hosting this. This is pretty awesome, and I'm hopeful that it will help people understand this significant disease. Let's see, I was just saying it's been a while since I've used a PC. I'm kind of a Mac girl. Okay, so for disclosures, obviously I have to disclose any non-academic partnerships or involvement that I have. So I do serve on an advisory board for a pharmaceutical company, and I have advised them on their educational content for an honorarium. As Ashley said, I am also on the board of directors for the National Kidney Foundation, and then you heard about all of my other academic endeavors as well. So, I have a list here of the things that we're going to try to hit today. I kind of modified this a little bit. You know, my usual shtick is to talk more about kidney disease and transplantation and access to transplant. And then, to be quite honest with you, I read the advertisement for this event, and I was like, oh gosh, they said that I'm going to talk about all the general kidney health stuff, so that's fine. But so you know, to be completely honest, I am a surgeon. I'm not a nephrologist. So what I do from a day-to-day basis is not necessarily to diagnose kidney disease or to manage kidney disease. I see people when they get to the way other end of that, once kidney disease has really run its course, and patients are looking for treatment options for what we call renal replacement. So I do kidney transplants, liver transplants. Why am I here talking about this today? I am pretty passionate about prevention. Don't get me wrong, I love to do a kidney transplant. There's nothing more gratifying than that. But as you'll see throughout the presentation, kidney disease is pretty significant in the country. And one of the things that really struck me, as Ashley said, I'm the director of the African American Transplant Access Program, is that how significantly kidney disease affects the African American community. And we'll learn a little bit why as we go throughout the presentation, but you know, that community in particular has a challenge when it comes to navigating the transplant evaluation program, or process rather. So it's all the more important to get information out there about prevention. You know, patients should be given the opportunity to prevent kidney disease, to manage their kidney disease, and slow their kidney disease so they don't have to see me if they can avoid it. So what I decided to do with this is I'm going to kind of take you through the sort of landscape of kidney disease as if you were in medical school. And I'm going to kind of assume that nobody here has ever heard the word kidney before. So don't be, you know, affronted if, you know, like, oh my gosh, you know, this is a little too basic. I'm just assuming that, you know, we have a very diverse crowd and everybody comes from a different background. So we'll start first with anatomy, because that's how medical school starts. We start with our anatomy classes because it's really difficult to understand a disease process if you don't know what the disease is stemming from, or what the organ is supposed to do normally. Where is it? How, what's the normal function before we jump right into what are, how it's misfunctioning or malfunctioning. So we'll talk a little bit about the anatomy. Then the next thing we'll do is we're going to talk about the pathophysiology. So the physiology and the pathophysiology. Physiology means what is a normal function of a kidney. Pathophysiology is what is the sort of bad things that it can do. So that's under the line there. What do the kidneys do anyway? Then we're going to get into kind of what the kidney disease looks like in the day-to-day. What symptoms might patients present with? How might kidney disease present in the community? We'll talk about prevention and treatment a little bit. And then one of the major things I think is so important to do when we're talking about kidney disease is to bust some of the myths about kidney disease, because there's a lot of myths out there, a lot of misconceptions. And then we'll just wrap it up with our key take-home points. So on to our anatomy lesson. So what are the kidneys? So the kidneys are bean-shaped organs. What I always tell patients is that they're about the size of your fist. So if you hold up your fist, your kidney's about that size. It might be a little bit bigger. And they're protected on your rib cage in the back. There, as you can see in the picture there, they're closer to the spine than they are to the front of your belly. And they're supplied with blood. You can see the red lines here. They're kind of going into the kidneys, and the blue ones that are coming out. I always like to talk about kidneys and livers and transplantation in terms of plumbing. When you're thinking about a sink, you have to have a pipe that brings water into the sink. You have to have a pipe that drains the sink. And it's the same thing with kidneys. You have to have a pipe that brings blood in. You have to have a pipe that drains it and brings the blood back out to the heart. And there's this cyclical process that goes on. And so blood is constantly being flushed through these kidneys. And we'll talk a little bit more about what is happening in the kidney. This is kind of a blown up picture of a kidney, and Ashley, it was very nice to bring a model here that we can pass around and that you can look at the end of the talk here. So this is a kidney as if it were cut lengthwise, and you can see the pipes headed in and out. And what those do is they branch smaller and smaller, and they feed blood to this thing here. And this is the building block of the kidney. It's called the nephron. And we have about 1 million nephrons in each kidney. Okay, and that number is going to become important later on when we talk about the disease process of kidneys. And so you can see that those blood vessels are kind of wrapping around those nephrons, and something is happening as that blood kind of bathes around that unit, and then it returns back out the blue vein, back up to the heart. And that process, as I said, goes around and around and around every single one of those nephrons in your kidneys. Okay, when I show the anatomy picture, I'm going to try to preempt some of the questions that we usually get, which is we show a picture of 2 kidneys. And so the question that usually comes up is, well, how can somebody survive with 1 kidney? And we'll answer that in a little bit. And the key is going to be talking about the nephrons, the functional unit or the building block of the kidney. But people can survive with 1 kidney. That's how transplant works, actually. And believe it or not, a small portion of the population are actually born with 1 kidney and don't even know it. I've been in a medical situation where we've gotten a CAT scan on somebody for some other reason. Suppose they had belly pain, or they might have gotten into a car accident or something like that. And, we do the CAT scan and we say, well, this is the reason for your belly pain. But by the way, did you know that you only have 1 kidney? And people are pretty surprised about that. So yes, we can live with 1 kidney. The kidneys are pretty powerful, and those nephrons can really support us. We are born with a lot of extras. So what do? So I showed you the picture of the blood bathing the nephron, and what that is doing is it's creating this kind of filtration process. What many of us have heard is that the kidneys are responsible for filtering the blood. That's kind of the basic role that we're told that the kidneys play in the body. And so as the blood comes in across this red pipe from the heart, it has blood that has kind of cycled through the body, and the kidney's job is to kind of take things out that we need and to filter through those nephrons the stuff that we don't need. And the stuff that we don't need is collected in this yellow tube, so another part of the plumbing that I haven't talked about yet. And that's how the urine is created. And so urine will go down to the bladder, and when our bladder is, maybe roughly halfway full, it'll signal to us like, oh, you need to go to the bathroom. And then we get rid of all that waste. And so that, in a nutshell, is what the kidneys do. Now, what is happening on a cellular level in the kidneys is that they're responsible for some pretty important things that they're filtering. And so I've written the main things here. So the acid balance in our body. Acid balance is very important because, when we think of acid, we think of pH. I don't know if you guys can dig way back to high school when you learned about pH and litmus strips and all that stuff. But the pH is very important for cellular function in our body. And so there are certain parts of our body that need to be at a high pH, certain parts that need to be at a low pH. And so acid balance is very, very important. If your acid balance is off, then sort of the homeostasis or the maintenance of the body can be broken. And all of these things that I've listed here are actually indications for dialysis. So if one of these functions of the kidney is broken, then a patient needs to have dialysis. They need to have something else to fix that homeostasis, otherwise the body starts to really misbehave. Balance of electrolytes. So the main ones that I like to talk about when I talk about kidney disease to patients are sodium and potassium. And so I was actually just at a school on Wednesday where I gave a lesson about kidney disease to some 9th grade biology students. And so I asked them to tell me all the things that they could think of that had sodium and potassium in it. The kidney has to regulate both of these ions or electrolytes. If the sodium is too high or too low, that'll affect how much water we retain, and which is very important. Potassium is very important in cellular function and sort of what we call the action potential, which helps our heart to beat, which helps our muscles to move, us to be able to walk and jump. And so if those are out of whack, then bad things can happen. And so the kids were able to describe a few things to me. Lay's potato chips was one of the big things that came up. Very, very good for sodium, and bananas was the potassium thing. But then we went down through a list of all the other foods that contain sodium and potassium in particular, and they were shocked. It's really everywhere. And so you can imagine that the kidneys have a pretty big job to maintain that balance because we're constantly putting sodium and potassium into our body. So if that balance is broken, then we are also looking at a need for dialysis. Balance of water, as I mentioned, that's pretty closely related to sodium. Wherever sodium goes, water will follow. And then the removal of toxins. And so there are some natural toxins that are just natural byproducts of what our body does, but then there are also toxins that we put into our body, certain medications and things like that, and our kidneys play a pretty important role in clearing those things out. So now that we know what the kidney does, it's a little bit easier, I shouldn't say it's very easy, but it's a little bit easier to now start to imagine what kidney disease would look like, because what you need to do is you need to think about all of the roles that the kidney plays and imagine what that would be like if it was broken. Okay, and so the next question that comes up, and a question that I get all the time, is can we feel kidney disease when it happens? Can we see it when it happens? And, this is one of the most powerful myths that we need to bust when we talk about kidney disease, because a lot of patients will think that if they don't feel bad, that nothing bad is going on. So now we're going to get back to our discussion about the nephron. You remember I said the nephron, we have 1 million, give or take, nephrons in each kidney. So if we are like the majority of the population have 2 kidneys, we have about 2 million nephrons. That's a lot of nephrons. And believe it or not, you have to lose over 80% of your nephron mass before you start to really feel the effects of kidney disease. And so kidney disease is a continuum, what I like to tell patients. It's not like, you have perfectly functioning kidneys one day and then the next day they're toast. And you're like, oh my gosh, I have kidney failure and you're in the hospital. Now, many patients that you may talk to will describe it that way. And that's because kidney disease is a silent killer, as we call it. Because as those nephrons are getting destroyed over time, you lose 10%, 20%, 30%. You can't feel that. There's no symptom associated with that. And it's not until you lose a significant amount of those nephrons that you start to feel some of the side effects. And even those side effects, I'll show them to you on the next slide, are really vague. And so if you don't know that you're having kidney disease and you're not being screened and you're not seeing your physician, when you find out and really start to feel the significant symptoms, is often very, very advanced kidney disease. And so what this picture shows here is that this is the continuum that I talked about. So we have, normal, and then you're kind of at increased risk. So you've lost, some of your nephrons. And so this is, roughly corresponds to about stage 2, where they say that you have 60 to 89% of your normal kidney function left, okay? So that's where you say you're increased risk. If you get to a good nephrologist at that point in time, you can actually slow down the progression of your kidney disease quite significantly and really hold on to your kidneys for longer. But again, no symptoms really associated with that. Then you get to some real kidney damage. You've lost a significant number of those nephrons. Then we have this stage here where it says reduced kidney function. So that's a stage where when you go in and you go to get some blood work, where it starts to really show up significantly in the blood work. So that's pretty advanced disease. And then kidney failure, and that's where people come to see me and they start talking about options for transplant. So let's talk about those vague symptoms of kidney disease. And these are actually on the cards that we have back there at the National Kidney Foundation. And a lot of this data, I have to say, is from the National Kidney Foundation. As Ashley said, I'm on the board of directors there. So I like to thank them for helping me with gathering the content for the presentation. But fatigue, less energy, trouble concentrating, trouble sleeping, poor appetite, muscle cramping at night, swollen feet or ankles or puffy eyes in the morning, dry, itchy skin, and frequent urination, particularly at night. Now, I can tell you that that constellation of symptoms is me on an average day after a long liver transplant, okay? So what do you do with that? You can't rely on symptoms alone to tell you when kidney disease has kicked in. And so that's one of the major take-home messages that I want to tell patients and the general public, people who aren't patients yet, is that it's so important to be an advocate for yourself. We'll talk about some of the risk factors for kidney disease in some of the next slides. If you have these risk factors, you should definitely be screened and have a relationship with your physician to make sure that if kidney disease is developing, you're catching it early. What happens if we don't get screened or we don't get diagnosed? A lot of people really believe in out of sight, out of mind. And that works for a little while because, as we know from what I just said, those symptoms will stay away for a very long time, but it doesn't stop, and kidney disease will catch up with you. It doesn't stop. So, out of sight, out of mind for a little while, but eventually kidney disease, or kidney failure rather, will set in. So this is what the kidney disease landscape looks like in the United States. And so the darker the red, the higher the prevalence, or the higher sort of the concentration of kidney disease in that region. You can see that that is significant amount of disease in the country. Kidney disease, again, as I said, is a silent killer. We can't oftentimes look at someone and say, this person has kidney disease. And so we're walking amongst millions of people every day who have kidney disease, and there's no way for us to tell. And oftentimes they don't know themselves. And kidney disease is quite significant here in the state of Illinois. I think I have some numbers here. So 30 million Americans in the U.S. have chronic kidney disease. That's 13% of the population. That's a huge number. Hundreds of thousands of Illinois residents have chronic kidney disease and don't know it because, as we said, those symptoms don't kick in until it's very advanced. Kidney disease is the 9th leading cause of death in the United States. That's huge. I mean, people do not think of kidney disease that way at all. And then I think this is the real ringer, is that the top 2 causes of kidney disease are diabetes and high blood pressure. And every day I say that to a crowd of people or to a patient in the room, and they're floored to find that out. And so those are 2 very modifiable diseases. We can control our blood sugar, we can control our blood pressure, and the control of those two diseases can either prevent kidney disease from setting in, or it can prolong the life of the kidney. You know, if kidney disease, if it's early stage, you can prolong. So knowledge is everything, right? For people who don't know this, and we'll talk about some of the myths around the management of those diseases. They may not recognize that by mismanaging those diseases, they're actually setting themselves up for another problem as well, namely kidney disease. So as I said, I'm the director of the African American Transplant Access Program, so here are some numbers around why it's important to us. This is something that's very near and dear to my heart because I have 2 members in my family that have kidney problems. And when I was training to become a transplant surgeon, or general surgeon rather, I rotated on the transplant service for the very first day. And that day we did an evaluation clinic for kidney transplant. We were evaluating 6 patients, and all 6 of those patients were African American. And that was the first time that I knew or recognized that kidney disease was so prevalent in our community. And that's a big deal because you know, African Americans are 4 times more likely to develop kidney disease. African Americans, we represent 13% of the population in the United States, but we represent 35% of all Americans suffering from kidney disease. That's a huge mismatch there. And so here are some of the reasons. A lot of people will ask, well, why? Why us? You know, why do we suffer more? Almost half of all African Americans, sorry, that's not supposed to be Americans, African Americans have high blood pressure, and African Americans are 2 times more likely to have diabetes. And again, 2 very modifiable diseases or controllable diseases. This repeats some of the things that I said on the slide before. In addition, African American patients are less likely to complete a transplant evaluation. They're less likely to be referred for transplant evaluation when they're at the end stages of their kidney disease. A lot of African American patients are referred directly to dialysis, and they aren't told about the option of transplant. I'll tell you why that's important in a minute. And they have lower access to living donor kidney transplant. And for those of you who don't know about sort of the ins and outs of transplantation, there are 2 ways a patient can get transplanted with a kidney. One is from a donor who has passed away, and that's, you know, the majority of the ways that patients can be transplanted. But the other is living donation. Now, the average waiting time for someone to get a kidney from someone who's passed away here in the state of Illinois is upwards of 8 years. It's a very long time to be waiting for a transplant. Dialysis, for those of you who don't know what dialysis looks like on the day-to-day, is a 4-hour session being hooked up to a machine that does the filtering for you. So we looked at the nephron and the kidney, and we talked about what the kidney does. It filters the blood, you know, it maintains the balance of potassium and sodium and water. When we can't do that for ourselves, when our kidneys can't do that for us, we have to be hooked up to a machine that does that for us. And so that's dialysis. And so we get hooked up to this machine, and it will filter our blood for us. It takes about 4 hours. And it's about 3 days a week that you do that. So you can imagine that patients who are in that situation find it very challenging to live their lives the way they used to before they developed kidney disease. A lot of patients can't work anymore, and they have difficulty being mobile. It really hinders travel and things like that. So, you know, it's a big deal. And so for a lot of patients to be shunted down that route and not be told about transplant is very significant. Living donor transplant, which is how I got started talking about that, is pretty amazing in that we learned also earlier that we can live with 1 kidney, right? There's a small percentage of us that are born with 1 kidney, and you need to lose a ton of nephron mass before kidney disease sets in, which tells us that the 1 million nephrons that or thereabout that you have in the 1 kidney is more than enough to support you. So someone can donate one of their kidneys because one of the 1 kidney they have left is very, very adequate to support them. And that kidney that they donate can go to someone in need. And that really is a game changer because someone who can benefit from living donation is someone who may get transplanted before they ever have to see a day of dialysis. And the literature shows us that that is the best case scenario for patients. Patients have the best outcomes if they can skip dialysis altogether. But dialysis, although it is a life-saving intervention, has its complications associated with it as well. And dialysis can shorten the lifespan. So, and we'll have a slide that shows that. And so if a patient can skip that 8-year wait here in Illinois while they're waiting for a kidney from someone who's passed away and get a living donor kidney, they've added years to their lives. And so that's pretty significant. And so that's something that we, like every patient, to have the opportunity to have. Can kidney disease be prevented or treated? And so we know the answer is yes, because we've talked about that. So here are some of the risk factors for chronic kidney disease. Diabetes and high blood pressure, as we said. And we know that those are the top 2 causes of chronic kidney disease. Heart problems or stroke, obesity, family history. So if people have, family members, particularly first-degree family members who have kidney disease, then their sort of alert should be up, and they should be really thinking about getting screened regularly and having, frank conversations with their physician about their risk. Tobacco use, and 60 years old. 2 other risk factors that are not on this slide but are very important are having an ethnicity of being African American or Hispanic, because we know that kidney disease is more prevalent in those communities. So treatment options. What I have put boldly in there in red is prevention, and you can't have prevention without education, and so that's what today is all about. If we missed the boat on prevention, which sometimes you can't avoid that, not all kidney disease can be prevented, unfortunately, then the next best treatment is good nephrology care. And so being hooked in with a good nephrologist or kidney specialist is a great way to manage kidney disease and get as much mileage out of your kidneys as possible before you have to start talking about renal replacement or kidney replacement. Kidney replacement comes in 2 different forms, which is dialysis and transplant. Dialysis is the most common route that patients will go, but transplant is actually superior to dialysis and is what we call the gold standard for, treating kidney disease. And I'm not saying that just because that's what I do. I actually have some data to support that. So this is a kind of a complicated slide, but I will break it down for you. And basically what it shows on each of these bars are different age groups, okay? So the top is ages 20 to 24, 25 to 29, and so on. And the orange bar shows what you expect on average those patients to survive if they were on dialysis. The blue bar shows how their lives would be extended if they got a transplant instead. So those are some pretty convincing numbers that transplant is superior to dialysis. On average, and of course, you can't ever say 100%, one way or another. There's always things that come up and things that happen. But the vast majority of patients who get transplanted can expect to live 2 times longer than if they had stayed on dialysis. So that's pretty significant. And we want all of our patients to be offered that opportunity and to be educated about that. So now we're down to our myth busting. And I'm sure there are many, many more than what I put on this slide here, but these are just the most common. If I am passing urine okay, my kidneys must be fine. Believe it or not, there is a subset of patients who have complete kidney failure. They're on dialysis 3 days a week, and they still make a normal amount of urine. It's just because that one function of their kidney is not broken. The other parts are broken. The kidney's ability to filter or maintain the balance of sodium and potassium and get rid of toxins and things like that, but the kidney is still able to make a normal amount of urine. So that is not a clear indication of kidney disease, and patients should not rely on their volume of urine as a marker for whether or not they're okay. It is normal for older people to have higher blood pressure as they age. Yes, blood pressure does increase as we age, but it is not normal for people to have abnormally high blood pressure. We know that, as we get older, our blood pressure may get to sort of the higher end of normal, but just because one of us may be 65 or older, it doesn't mean that it's okay to sit there with abnormally high blood pressures. It will cause damage. I can usually feel when my blood sugar is high, so if I feel okay, it must be fine. So this is a comment to people who have diabetes. And so many patients who have diabetes, if their blood sugar is out of range, they'll start to feel symptoms. They might get sweaty, they might get shaky. And so they kind of use that as an indicator, like, oh, I should go check my blood sugar. So then they, do the finger prick and they check it and they realize it's wrong and they can treat it. But one of the things that the kidney is responsible for is maintaining the level of insulin in our bodies. So as our kidneys fail, it can't maintain that balance of insulin the way it's supposed to. So we actually can't feel the symptoms of our sugars being out of range because our kidneys are holding on to insulin abnormally. And so so patients may feel okay, and they may opt not to check their sugars, but their sugars may actually be out of control without them knowing it because they don't feel the symptoms as well as they used to. And so in that setting, diabetes, which is the number one cause of kidney disease, can be silently doing its evil deeds, and patients will be none the wiser. Where was I? If my blood pressure becomes normal with my medicine, I can stop taking it. That's something that we see a lot of. Patients will take blood pressure medication for a few weeks or a few months, and they check their blood pressures like they're told to, and the blood pressure is fine, and so then they are led to believe then that their blood pressure has been fixed, and that they can stop checking it and they can stop taking the medication. And then that's also a situation where silently the damage is being done. I feel like my usual self, so kidney disease cannot happen to me. So we talked about this already, that the symptoms don't set in until the damage is quite advanced. And kidney disease happens all at once, so there is nothing I can do about it. And we talked about that as well, about the continuum of kidney disease and how it takes a long period of time, and it's usually a period of months and sometimes years that damage is ongoing before a patient reaches an advanced stage or end stage kidney disease. So we are now at the end for our take-home message. And so these are the facts that I thought were the most important for the community to take home after this talk, is that kidney disease is a silent killer that affects a huge number of Americans. We can't tell outwardly if someone has kidney disease. We can't tell outwardly oftentimes if we have kidney disease, and the early symptoms are often very, very vague. Some kidney disease can be prevented. I think that's very important for people to know. And that early diagnosis and good kidney care can slow the progression of kidney disease once it's set in. There are many reasons for people to have kidney disease beyond high blood pressure and diabetes. Those are certainly the top two causes. But there are genetic causes, there are medication causes, there's a number of different things. They're less common than diabetes and high blood pressure. But, and some of those can't be avoided, particularly some of the genetic disorders. But it can be treated and managed, and kidney disease can be slowed. Know the risks, and we showed what some of the risk factors are, and advocate for yourself. I think that this is a day and age that is very, very different from, say, my grandparents were, they only did what the doctor said, and, they kind of, it's like if the doctor didn't say to do it, they weren't gonna, step out and say, hey, doc, what about this, But this is different, and medicine is different, and I think a big, big part of good medical care is being able to advocate for yourself and being able to ask questions if you don't understand, to attend sessions like this to gain more understanding. Oftentimes, we as physicians can't spend all the time that patients need in the room to talk. I certainly don't have time to go through a whole anatomy lesson and, everything else. And so educating yourself, advocating for yourself is very, very important. And then using the resources around you. And I know that our NU Go Kidney has a table out there with some great resources. We have National Kidney Foundation, who has been very generous to come and have a table here with some information as well. Lots of online resources. And that is it. And so I thank you for your attention, and any questions that I can answer, I'm happy to. Please. Yeah.
doesn't matter. I have a whole bunch of questions.
Okay.
My first question is how do you know when you need a nephrologist? My creatones are 1.2, and the other range you gave, I'm at like 52. Do I need a nephrologist?
So it's a question that is kind of a gray answer. It's a question that you should be asking your primary care physician, because that's usually how that relationship is in how you're introduced to a nephrologist. My personal opinion, yes. But it's something that patients often, if they're not thinking about it, it will just go unnoticed, because a lot of time our primary carers are overwhelmed. They're seeing a lot of patients in a short period of time. And so, being aware of what your labs are doing and what your kidney function is doing, and then asking that question, hey doc, when is it good for me to go see a nephrologist? I don't think it's ever bad to even ask to see one, because the worst thing that can happen, which is actually probably a good thing, is that you go see a nephrologist and they'll say, oh, you don't need to see me. Right? That's not bad. So back to that self-advocacy, talk to your primary care about it. I don't think it's ever a bad thing.
And my second question is, what medications? I'm on lots of blood pressure medication, and something seem to affect my kidneys. Are there certain blood pressure medications?
There's a lot of blood pressure medications that are available. There are some that nephrologists prefer patients with kidney disease to be on, and some that they prefer them to be off That's where I'm going to leave that answer, because I'm a surgeon and I'm not a nephrologist, so I don't manage blood pressure medication. As I said, when I see patients, it's when their disease is at end stage. But I do know enough that, yes, there will be tweaking of medications for sure. And so that's something also to talk with your primary care and your nephrologist about, because there are definitely some medications that they prefer patients not to be on.
We keep playing around with it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I have two questions for you,
Sure.
one real and maybe one sci-fi. So the first one is, why do you think dialysis patients die so much earlier than the transplant?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons. I would say probably one of the top reasons is cardiovascular complications. So what we know is that long-term dialysis can cause hardening of the arteries, so to speak. It's kind of the common way to say it. But and that can lead to heart attacks, strokes. It can lead to peripheral vascular disease, where patients have to have amputations, and then subsequent infections and things. That's one of the number one complications of dialysis. There are many others, but that's the most common.
So it's something that the dialysis is not doing right, probably. Is that right?
Say that again?
It's something that the dialysis is not doing right.
No, it's not that. It's just an unfortunate consequence of an unnatural process in your body. We weren't meant to sit there plugged into a machine for 4 hours and have every drop of our blood drained out and filtered through a machine and returned back to us. And so, there's a lot of things that we do with good intentions to try to fix a problem, but there are always going to be side effects or complications, and that's just one of them.
Okay, the sci-fi question is, how far away are we from an artificial kidney?
That's not sci-fi at all. That's
I know.
actually, yeah, I know, right? And so there's a lot of work being done on that, and one of my partners at Northwestern is doing a lot of work on that. And he would probably be the better one to answer that in terms of how close we truly are. But I do know that from just reading the news and what they've covered is that they've created artificial kidneys that can create urine. They can't do the filtration yet. And these are not human. This is based off of animal models, and I believe it's rat cells. I'm not quite sure, but it's in process, and it's pretty exciting to think that maybe in my lifetime I might be transplanting one of those instead.
We have an online question.
Oh, sure. I didn't even know this was online. That's cool.
Is there a reason the incidence of kidney disease seems to be lower in the western U.S., specifically the Pacific Northwest? Based on that map, I think.
I would imagine that a lot of that is related to, let me go back to that picture. What I'm answering is going to be my guess, just because I don't know the specific answer to that. But you got to think about, one is how the population is divided in terms of ethnicity. We know that there are certain ethnic groups that are at higher risk for kidney disease, and so where they're concentrated, you're going to see more concentrated cases of kidney disease. One of the things that is, if you were to look at a map of the United States and look at rates of obesity and how that is distributed, that will play a role too. Obesity leads to diabetes, which is our number one cause of high blood pressure, or of kidney disease. High blood pressure is also related to obesity. And so it's basically how the population is distributed in terms of the risk factors. And so risk factors will tend to be concentrated in certain areas. There's other things that I haven't touched on at all in this talk because it's just a talk all in itself, which is something that we call social determinants of health. And so at-risk populations that don't have the resources that they need because they're disadvantaged economically, and so you'll see higher prevalence not only of kidney disease but of all types of diseases in those regions because they don't have access to grocery stores, they don't have access to good primary care or specialists. We see a lot of that in our own communities here in Chicago. I mean, a lot of people will think like, oh, that's not here, but it is here, and it's in a lot of different places.
How do nephrons get destroyed?
There's probably a number of ways, and that's probably more of a question for a nephrologist. But, in terms of blood pressure, you can have an increased pressure which can destroy. This is at like a very, very microscopic cellular level. Diabetes causes some changes that will destroy the nephron. You have to think about each individual disease process that destroys a nephron and think about it that way. Some people who have, very low blood pressure, for example, someone who's septic and has an abnormally low blood pressure and the kidneys aren't getting the oxygenated blood that they need, the nephrons can be destroyed that way because essentially they're deprived of oxygen. There's a number of different ways.
I know you called it plumbing, but can you tell us when you do a transplant, the basic things you do? Like, do you just disconnect some tubes and reconnect?
I am essentially a plumber. And so for kidneys specifically, we leave the old kidneys alone. So the old kidneys aren't doing anything. And to go up there, back here by the rib cage and stuff to get those means a really big incision, is a lot of pain, it's a longer recovery for the patient. So we don't do anything with that. And so what we do, let me find a good picture for you. Here's this is a good one, is we take the new kidney and we hook it up on the pipes at a different location because it really truly is plumbing. So the pipes, as you can see here, split into two. This is about at the level of the belly button that our pipes split into two before they go down each leg. And so you can take and put a kidney on this set of pipes on the, let's see, this is the patient's left-hand side or on the right-hand side, and you can choose. And so I take the kidney, so the kidney that I take has here, this is a great time for this. So this is our cross-section of a kidney. And so you can see the pipes coming out here. So this is also an abnormally large kidney. We don't transplant kidneys this big. So I would take it in and I would expose those blood vessels on the right or the left. And I would sew this one here, red to red, blue to blue. And then the third pipe that I have to connect is whatever function the organ is that we're transplanting. So the function for the kidney is to make urine. Then I have to connect this pipe here to the bladder. And for a liver transplant, it's different. With a liver, we actually remove the liver. So there's no place else really to put in a liver just because of the way the liver functions and what it's supposed to do. So we remove the liver, and then we put the new liver in back where the old liver was, and the plumbing that we hook up there is similar. We hook up a pipe that brings blood in, we hook up a pipe that takes blood out and returns it to the heart, and then we hook up the functional pipe, which is bile. The liver makes bile, and we hook that up to the intestine.
Do you have 3 kidneys at the end?
Yeah. Or 4 if it's your second transplant. Yeah, I've.
And you leave that other one working as is, like,
Yeah, I mean, over time, so oftentimes when patients come to us for a transplant, their kidneys are not working. You know, many patients are not even making urine anymore. I did point out that some patients can make urine despite having end-stage kidney disease, but I would say the majority of patients have either diminished amount of urine or no urine at all. And so those kidneys, you know, over time, as we say, kind of just shrivel up. They don't go away, but they become atrophic. So they're just kind of wilted, and they just hang out there and don't do much of anything.
Does alcohol damage kidneys?
That's a question I hear a lot. You know, alcohol does not damage kidneys in the way that it damages the liver. So we don't see people coming in with end-stage kidney disease because of a lot of alcohol. Alcohol damages the liver, which when the liver goes downhill, it oftentimes takes the kidney with it. So many times that we transplant a patient for alcohol cirrhosis, we are also transplanting a kidney at the same time. But directly, no. It's not something that we would advise patients the way we advise our liver patients that, you know, your kidneys are you know, showing some damage, so you should cut out alcohol. I mean, we always tell people that they should drink in moderation. But yeah, it doesn't have a direct effect in the way that it does on the liver.
How is the function of the liver and the kidneys like
Related? Oh,
Yeah.
that's a whole science lesson in itself, and I don't know that people really truly understand like the intricacies of it. But it's one thing that we do know. As a matter of fact, when we calculate the score for how sick a liver patient is, their kidney function is included in that score because they are so closely intertwined. Yeah.
So it really benefits us to drink lots and lots and lots of water.
Yes, it does. Yes, and I think that one of the handouts from the National Kidney Foundation, if it's not back there, it's certainly at their website, is a lot of information on just sort of healthy practices and behaviors to keep your kidneys healthy. And the National Kidney Foundation also has the kidney mobile that goes around with free screenings, which is very important to point out as well for patients, because you know the more we know, the more we know.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's it.
Okay.
I'm sure you can field some questions afterwards
Sure.
if anything pops up.
Okay.
But thank you so much for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that was a great talk. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.